Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Breda Pest Management, and we're happy that you're with us no matter how you get to us today. Video across all platforms, so much fun, fired up, unbelievably so, because we just experienced one of the most chaotic college football weekends in recent memory, and Georgia was not a participant in that chaos. And so if you're not happy about that as a UGA fan today, I don't know what to tell you. We're also pretty fired up because Kirby Smart, as you know, has called out the fans. What is the, the nature of all of this? We're going to cover that on the show today, too. Major UGA recruiting news on the program today there as well. Issues where Georgia's still trying to figure some stuff out today. Tackling defensively, not perfect. That's just kind of what it is here right now. You got to make peace with it and be ready to move on. We have got so much to talk about. Jon Stinchcomb helps us do it there as well. So what do you say? We just sort of throw it all up against the wall. We're going to see what sticks. There's going to be plenty of, plenty of emotion here today, even though Kirby Smart's warning us not to be too emotional. We're going to cover all of that ground. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We are so fired up here today. I mean, look, what a weekend it was that obviously Georgia gets a rivalry win against Auburn. We'll talk about that. But it comes in the midst of one of the most shocking upsets we'll ever see in our entire life. Now, point spread-wise, it's not even the biggest point spread upset we're likely to see probably this year. But when you put the names next to the teams, Bama lost to Vanderbilt. It's almost like the kind of thing that you would cite as an example of the sort of impossible result in college football that would never happen. And yet on this particular Saturday, it did. That is crazy. And then Tennessee goes out and loses to Arkansas. It is just unbelievable. And honestly, all of that is the context for what happened for Georgia, but not just this Saturday against Auburn, which we'll talk about, but also, doesn't this cause you to go back and rethink Georgia in Missouri 2022, where Georgia played a bad game that day? But my goodness, thank God they won, right? Because Bama didn't and Tennessee didn't. Thank God Georgia won that game. And this season it's Kentucky. How upset was the average Georgia fan after that game against Kentucky? But it could have been worse, and this past Saturday demonstrates just how true that could be. And once again, I mean, and listen, we've been doing this now. This is our 10th season doing DawgNation Daily. The nitpicking things after a win is just sort of what about half the season sort of ends up being for Georgia football sometimes, it seems. But all of that just seems so pointless in the context of Bama lost at Vanderbilt. And Tennessee lost riding high, hottest team in the country, lost to Arkansas. And all of a sudden now, folks, the Georgia loss to Alabama like 2 Saturdays ago, that might as well have been 12 years ago. That was a different universe, a different galaxy in a different era because the sport got completely turned on its side here in this most recent Saturday. And all of a sudden now, Georgia is 2 Saturdays away from possibly, and a win at Texas coming up then, maybe, from kind of completely resetting the board in the SEC, where now there'll be no undefeated teams left in the SEC. That's how crazy all of this could be. And listen, my belief here is, and I'm going to be, kind of fired up today, I guess, a little bit. But my belief is, if you're a Georgia fan, man, you ought to be lapping this up. You ought to be so fired up about all of this. Not because we know how it's going to end. All that's over. We said this last Monday. The run of dominance 2021 and 2022, where Georgia was essentially guaranteed a victory because they had the greatest defense of all time, or it won a national championship, undefeated, barely even played any close games all year long. That's in the history books. We all lived through it. We enjoyed it. This is a new era for Georgia football, and it's a new era for college football. We don't know how this season's going to end. It may end in, horrible disappointment for UGA. But my gosh, has the sport ever been more entertaining than what it is right now? And have you ever been happier to have Georgia right at the center of all of this than you are here at this moment? I think the correct answer is hopefully that you are enjoying this as much as I think you're supposed to. Now, you'll come back to, but what about the lack of explosive plays for Georgia on offense? And what about some of the issues with tackling on defense? Georgia's not a perfect team. Not a perfect team. But I do think it got better on Saturday. I mean, after all, we said, hey, meager goal going into the game. Can you score a touchdown in every quarter? Georgia did. Defensively, after a ton of missed tackles against Alabama, there were at least, to my eyes, fewer of those against Auburn. Lesser competition, of course, but it still seems like an inching step in the right direction on all of that. And it was a game that, for the most part, below the point spread, but other than that, for the most part, played out kind of as it was supposed to play out, which is for the Vols and the Tide, the type of thing they are unbelievably envious and jealous of here today because of the fact that they obviously had a very, very different kind of result. And when Kirby Smart met with the media on Saturday evening after his game, it was right in the midst of Alabama officially losing to Vanderbilt, and Smart had his chance to talk about all of this, the fact that when you see the craziness happening, the fact that Georgia plays so few of these crazy games is, for Georgia, a very commendable point of pride. Kirby Smart reminding all of us about that on Saturday in the midst of the Alabama loss that had everybody in the UGA bookstore where we were doing the postgame show fired up on Saturday. This is what Kirby Smart said.
I think Vandy's got a great program and does a great job. I mean, it's a lot of other people that don't respect Vandy. I respect Clark Lee. I respect his team, his quarterback, what they've done. They beat Virginia Tech. I mean, somebody told me that 6 of 8 games were decided by one score or less in our league. Nothing shocks me about our league. So, Texas A&M, Missouri, welcome to the SEC. It's hard every week, and I got a feeling that it's not going to stop. It's a consistency in performance, and when you ride the wave of emotion, you get caught on the bottom of the wave at sometimes. And we're just trying to do this. We're just trying to keep getting better and keep getting better.
If you're listening on podcast or radio and Kirby Smart says we're trying to do this, he's moving his hand straight across here saying he doesn't want to be a wave going up and down. He wants to be even keel and straighter. And obviously I'm not achieving that objective very well today because I'm, kind of shot out of a cannon here. But I do think that by and large, the best that I can tell is that everybody just needs to do a better job of appreciating how crazy the season can be and how the loss that Georgia suffers to Alabama. Listen, Georgia did not have an impressive performance last Saturday. We all understand that. But in light of what we've also seen now from other teams around college football, there are other teams who are themselves also not having very impressive performances. And all of a sudden now it is anybody's ball game here once again. And if you're a Georgia fan, you got to be very, very excited about your potential of getting a little bit better week after week after week and having your chance to get big wins that kind of put you right where you want to be come season's end. That's what this past weekend was. It was the absolute reboot that you desperately wanted as a Georgia fan after a Saturday 2 weeks ago when you did not play very well at all, I would say, despite the comeback there against the Alabama Crimson Tide. But the sense that you get, and you know where we're going here because this is obviously a hot topic for us. We were, after all, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, the intersection of the Georgia team and the Georgia fans. That's where we spend our life discussing and talking. And the sense that you get is what Kirby Smart's saying there about his team trying to avoid chaos and obviously recognizing that chaos can happen at any moment. The sort of excitement and positivity that we'd love to see DawgNation have. Right now, it seems like some of that's a little tepid. Some of that's a little lukewarm. And the atmosphere in the stadium on Saturday apparently was not particularly great. Now, I say apparently because in the new press box, and this is not me complaining, but it's just very different, used to be that right in the center of the action, open windows, you really kind of felt the crowd atmosphere. And for someone like me, that's something I very much enjoy. In the new press box, it's glass. You're kind of far removed. I couldn't really tell you if the atmosphere was good on Saturday or not. I just don't know anymore, and I probably never will again. That's just kind of the way that goes. But certainly the sense that you got was obviously very hot in the stands and just kind of lackluster in terms of an environment and atmosphere. Georgia fans perhaps still reeling from the loss to Alabama, still kind of dealing with all of that. And Kirby Smart sort of spoke about that in terms of how his team is trying to move on from a loss to Alabama and the fact that he wants to see DawgNation, the fan base, kind of move on there as well. And I thought that Kirby Smart chose his words carefully, but they were direct. They were spoken right to UGA fans in his post-game press conference on Saturday. This is what Kirby Smart had to say.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm going to be honest, because all people talked about all week was what? That. Right? I mean, that's all people talked about all week. I mean, it was all over every Twitter feed, all over every social media, everything. And I told y'all before we played them, I said, when we win or lose this game, there is a tough physical game after it. And there is. And guess what there is next week? Another one. Humility is a week away in our league at all times. And that's the consistency I want to have. We're not going to win all our games all the time. That's not going to happen. I want our fan base to appreciate what we have and give their all and be unbelievable with crowd noise and make energy and just make home games, because we need it to be tough on other teams to play here. But it's not. It's not the same as it's been in the past. It's got to be energetic. It's got to be hard. You know what? It was hot today. It was hot today. It was hot on our players too, and our players pushed through it. So I'm really proud of this team, because I thought it was a tough week, and we answered the bell.
All right, let me say this just for a second. It goes without saying to me that Kirby Smart has earned the right to be able to say whatever he wants to Georgia fans. And it's not just because his team has won so many games. Let me tell you what I love about Kirby. This is as someone who's both in the media, but kind of in the media from sort of a fan perspective. I probably have a unique point of view on all of this. Watch some of our dog walk videos sometime, including the one from Saturday that we put up on the DawgNation YouTube page. Cody Chafin does a great job of filming that, and I narrate it. Watch the way that Kirby Smart for a home game works the rope line as if he's a presidential candidate. High-fiving every kid, hugging fans, like really going out of his way to be personable. Do you think that he wants to do that? I mean, obviously he likes fans. I'm not saying he doesn't. What I'm saying is that Kirby's ready to play a game, and yet going in to have his final meeting with his players before the game takes place, the job that he's paid to do, Smart takes that time out of his morning, daytime routine to also engage with fans, because that's how much he believes in the fan environment at Sanford Stadium. You can see this with your own eyes. You can watch this with the videos that we put up there. He goes out of his way to do this. And we're going to see some of this here right now in just a second live on video, where Smart, comes around here, starts, shaking hands and hugging folks and doing that kind of thing. This is like the most serious, like hardcore football coach. Watch him right there. The most serious, hardcore football coach in the world, and he looks like he's running for Congress. I mean, he's shaking hands. He's saying hello to people. He's smiling. This is the intense, tough, the same guy you hear doing these fiery pregame speeches, and yet he's showing his sort of warm and fuzzy side, and he does this before every home game. And not to mention that, think about what he said about fans after the Arkansas game in 2021. He gave you credit for 10 points in that game. Think about what he said after the Tennessee game in 2022, bragging on all the things that fans had done to create that atmosphere. Think about 93 K-Day, the first G-Day of his Georgia tenure as head coach. He made fans a central part of the foundational origin story for his era as the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. This has been the most fan-friendly coach in college football. Not always the most media-friendly coach, but there is no more fan-friendly coach in college football than Kirby Smart. And he has credited fans with major performances in Georgia victories over and over and over again. And he goes out of his way to make the handful of fans that he has a face-to-face interaction with feel like they are a part of the game when it comes to dog walk and stuff like that. So if he says you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And, this thing of, well, if they tackle better, I'd cheer more. Or if, they score more points, I'd cheer more. That's not the agreement you make as a sports fan. It's just not. This idea of, well, if you don't play perfectly, I'm not cheering at all. I'm going to sit on my hands. Y'all, that's just a recipe for unhappiness in every element of your life. And I got on a little bit of a soapbox before the show began. I'm not going to do that now. But some of y'all, and I got to be really careful how I say this because I love y'all, but some of y'all, the way that you talk about Georgia football tells me a lot more about you than it does Georgia football. And I think in so many words, that's also what Kirby Smart is trying to say here, is that some of y'all just have a hard time being happy. And if you can't be happy with this version of Georgia football, even after an ugly game at Alabama, then you literally can't be happy. Full stop. And I think that Kirby Smart was right to say what he said. In fact, he wasn't done. After he had the press conference, he goes on with his weekly interview with the former Georgia quarterback DJ Shockley from our friends at Fox 5, and he kind of went into this a little bit more and got even more pointed with these remarks, and I don't think incorrectly so. Here's Kirby Smart again.
It was a great victory for Georgia. Tell you what, it was hot out there today, Shock. And if anything, to be honest, I'm a little disappointed. And I'm probably disappointed in our fans for the first time that I thought there was, a lack of really affecting the game, crowd noise-wise, passion and energy. And, hey, it was hot, but our players got full pads on, helmets, pads, and it's hot out there. And they're pushing, trying to have a home field advantage like we've had when we've played against teams. And I can't get crowd noise. And that's frustrating for me, so I just be honest about it. I think we got to do a better job as fans. And I know I got to do a better job as a coach, but we need these fans to support us, and these players need them behind them.
He wouldn't say it if he didn't mean it. He wouldn't. He wouldn't. And after all the times that he's given you credit for your role in wins that Georgia's gotten, when he didn't have to do that. I mean, Kirby Smart's the most serious, hardcore football guy. Talk to people who know him personally. They'll tell you 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, this guy is as driven as can be about football. So the fact that for his relationship with the fans, he kind of leans into his sort of touchy-feely side a little bit more, to the extent that he has a touchy-feely side, the fact that he sort of leans into his warm, fuzzy side a little bit more is simply nothing but a generous gift that he gives to DawgNation. I want the fans to feel a part of this. Well, if he opens the door for you to be a part of it, he's going to have expectations for you. And on Saturday, you didn't meet his expectations. Now, I think you got a chance to bounce back and show better performance this upcoming Saturday against Mississippi State. I believe that you probably will. I certainly hope that you do. But to sort of wrap up this portion of the conversation, I'm not trying to preach at you. I'm not your daddy. I'm not your boss. I can't tell you what to do. But my encouragement would be enjoy this season, even with the very real possibility that Georgia just may not be national championship good this year. They might not be. I mean, none of this can be guaranteed. But maybe they are. In a crazy year in which Georgia played horrible for a first half against Alabama and then pretty good after that. Alabama then turned around the following week and lost to Vanderbilt. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. All kinds of crazy stuff happening all across the sport. Who's to say that Georgia couldn't figure out a way to get it done right now? As imperfect as they are, as many issues as they're still trying to correct, but maybe getting a little bit better week to week here. Who's to say they couldn't find a way to get it done again? Here's what I can tell you. The next couple of months are going to be unbelievably entertaining. I am so, so grateful to have Georgia right at the center of the discussion. And I can't wait to see what happens next. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're glad that you're with us no matter how you're with us today. It's video 10 a.m., or radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, podcast, Apple, Spotify, everything else. We're just so glad that you are a part of the show, and so thankful to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. Saturday, not the most comfortable day at home for Georgia fans. It was obviously very hot outside. You can't dispute that. And as Kirby Smart said, the Georgia players dealing with that too. Would have been a great day to be kind of inside maybe, and have the great energy-efficient windows and doors that Pella Window and Door of Georgia is famous for, helping keep everybody cool and comfortable on the inside of their home, the way that Pella is great about doing. And if you want to take the absolute best possible care of your home, making that upgrade and bringing in those Pella windows and that Pella door and having a conversation with one of those Pella experts about how you do that, this is the time to do that. Because, listen, we're at a time, and obviously, you love your home. You want to take good care of your home. You want to demonstrate that you value what is, in many cases, the most important financial asset you have. Well, how you treat it matters. And that means better curb appeal because you get the good-looking windows, the great-looking entry door. That's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. So have one of the Pella experts come out and talk to you. They can tell you how and why the Pella product is recognized as such a market leader in that particular space. You can also get great savings there as well. Between now and Halloween on October 31st, you can get 10% off a Pella project or no interest if paid in full within 12 months. You can also stop by and see them. Experience Centered there in Duluth. You can reach out online. Let's do PellaGA.com on that. Really, really simple website, PellaGA.com. We're making that really streamlined and simple, PellaGA.com, for more on that. You can also, and I guess we're also doing PellaGA.com/DawgNation now. Well, there you go on that. PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 628-1429. So, okay, we got a little bit of a difference of opinion here. So, let's make sure we check all that and see if we can get rolling on that today. But Pella Window and Door of Georgia, they are viewed to be the best. Make sure you check them out here today. Let me also say this to you here. Obviously, we're getting really, really excited about our next DawgNation Invasion event. As I told you before, all of a sudden now, Georgia is playing at Texas 2 Saturdays from now with a chance to, like, knock everybody out. And all of a sudden now there's no more undefeated teams left in college in the SEC anyway. And, perhaps Georgia kind of climb right back to the top of the landscape here in the sport. Well, we want you there for one of the biggest games that Georgia's ever played, our DawgNation Invasion event in Austin. Got hotel rooms through our friends at ATL Sports Trips. Those are going fast. Obviously, your chance to be a part of the big Friday night pregame party, the big DawgNation Invasion tailgate on Saturday, and another one of these great DawgNation Invasion t-shirts. So I need you to go to DawgNation.com/tailgate to find out more about this. Limited supply on these t-shirts. So jump in here and get it while you can. Be a part of the big event. DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. We hope to see you there coming up in a couple of weeks. And if you want to act quick, I believe there's still some room inventory left. Maybe. Those are hard to come by, but our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips have done a good job of kind of securing some of that. So you can get in on that, be a part of the tailgate. If you want just the tailgate, you can get that. If you want the full travel package, we can still, I think, accommodate a few more folks there on that. So much stuff going on in Austin in a couple of weeks. Can't wait to see you for it. It's DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. All right. Now, we got a big show coming up. Before we're done, huge recruiting update, including a big commit and some major visitors, including some surprises there for the game on Saturday. We've also got Jon Stinchcomb here in just a moment there as well. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse. Supported today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And, look, we said this before, and I said this last week. Man, I hope you enjoyed 2021, and I hope you enjoyed 2022, because 2021, Georgia may have had the best defense of all time. I mean, they really might have. And in 2022, Georgia was so dadgum good. In, 15 games of going undefeated, they played 2 one-possession games. Am I right about that? Two one-possession games that year. Had to come back against Missouri, had a, nail-biter down to the wire against Ohio State. And pretty much every other game in a 15-0 national championship season was essentially blowout city. That was Georgia playing at an almost perfect level. This is not a perfect Georgia team here right now. I do believe they inched towards improvement, perhaps, with how they played on Saturday against Auburn. We'll talk more about the offensive side of the ball on that tomorrow. On the defensive side of things, it has been a lot to get used to. I don't deny this. It's been a lot to get used to watching Georgia be somewhat human on defense. They miss tackles. They give up yards. This is not a Georgia defense that goes out and throws a Don Larson-style perfect game week in and week out the way it would have in the past. And Kirby Smart sort of making peace with that himself there too. In his post-game press conference on Saturday, to go back to that for a moment, once again the subject came up of, tackling better, doing a better job of getting guys to the ground. How did he feel that was on Saturday? Smart talked more about that this past weekend. This is Kirby Smart from his post-game press conference.
You play really good backs, they're going to break tackles. I was more disappointed in the pursuit than I was the tackling. We did miss one tackle, but there were 7 other people that never got a chance to get a tackle because they were tired, couldn't get there, not hustling. I mean, in football, you got to defeat a block, make a tackle. We defeated a block and missed a tackle. So everybody makes a lot of big deal about the tackling. And, I went home from practice, I guess it was Wednesday or Thursday, and I was like, man, our tackling's bad. We didn't tackle good at Thursday practice. And I got home and I watched the Falcons and and I was like, man, the tackling is awful all over. I'm not saying the Falcons are, but I'm saying in the NFL, it's just bad tackling, and we have bad tackling. So it's indicative of the culture that football, that people don't tackle, people don't hit, people don't practice like they used to, including us.
Yeah, the unspoken part of that is, as we've been saying now for a week, that Georgia's just a little bit more like the other teams now. Whereas for 2021 and 2022, and even a good bit of 2023, Georgia was sort of in a category by itself. Like there was, people put college football teams into tiers, that Georgia was sort of its own tier off by itself because they just played a brand of physical football that was unlike anything else that anybody was playing. And now that's just kind of not the case. It doesn't mean that Georgia can't be the best of all these teams. It just means that they don't quite have the sheer dominance that they once had. And maybe no one else will ever have again, because the way in which you practice is changing. The level of depth you have is changing. There's perhaps more parity in the sport now. And so therefore the byproduct is Georgia just looks a lot more like the other teams than it has the last few years. And that's just a fact. You got to kind of deal with that. But Kirby Smart did get pretty pointed on Saturday as he discussed how it is that he plans to see Georgia deal with it. This idea that you get blocked on the edge, you get sealed off, and all of a sudden you're not able to, as they say, sort of set the edge and, prevent the outside runs. Kirby Smart did get pretty pointed with what he sort of thinks you need to do if you want to do better at that. This was one of the sort of viral moments from the weekend. Here's Kirby Smart.
No, I would probably attribute it to the fact we were in a 3-down front. They blocked Odd Mug, and they brought a guy around the edge, and we didn't do a good job handling that. We didn't strike blockers and get off. You got to do sometimes what you call open a can of whoop, and we didn't do that. So
we're probably the only show that'll bleep that, but we also are unapologetically family friendly around here. But nonetheless, we don't disapprove of Kirby Smart's very direct message there of, hey, right now Georgia is probably not. Just a fact of the matter. They are probably not blowing people up, opening up a can of you-know-what on opponents defensively the way they have in the past. Can they get more like that before the season's done? I certainly hope the case is that's the case. It'd be great if it could be and perhaps would be. But we're just seeing Georgia look a little bit more like some of the other teams that it plays and like some of the other teams around the sport. They are in the category of top teams. They are no longer seemingly in a category by themselves. So what do? You figure it out. You figure out how to be more explosive offensively. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. You figure out how to, open up a can of you-know-what every now and then on defense when you can. You figure some of that kind of stuff out. And listen, while all of this takes place, with as much craziness as happening around college football, the only thing we can do as Georgia fans is just enjoy it, appreciate it, have some fun with it, and trust that a Georgia team that certainly figured some stuff out before might be able to figure this out as well. And that is Around the Doghouse. It's poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. I love college football Saturdays. I loved coming home, got home in time on Saturday to watch the Tennessee-Arkansas game. We were obviously watching Alabama-Vandy at the UGA bookstore. And when these sort of crazy things are happening, I am always thinking about Dr. Pepper and their connection to college football there, too. The Fansville commercials, the fact that, and literally, truly, I sit on my back porch and watch these games and have myself a Dr. Pepper. It's kind of a treat I save for myself when I come home from a big day of work or something like that. I really do love it. I really do. That is as genuine and real as it comes, authentic. And I think you will there as well. I am so proud. One of my proudest things is to have Dr. Pepper as a part of DawgNation Daily here. I love having him a part of Around the Doghouse. I love Dr. Pepper. Make sure you pick some up. You're shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're doing your shopping. Pick up some Dr. Pepper and enjoy it here as we head towards another college football weekend. Great to have Dr. Pepper a part of Around the Doghouse here today. All right, great to have all of you here too. As I said, Georgia gets a commitment. Georgia got some surprise visitors on Saturday. Georgia had some committed elsewhere visitors on Saturday. There's a lot of UGA recruiting talk to give you before we're done. Also, plenty more on the Bama loss, the Tennessee loss, and trouble in Tuscaloosa there as well. We got good stuff coming up on all of this. So we'll get to it. But for now, let's talk to Jon Stinchcomb here today, the former Georgia All-American weighing in. What's next for UGA? The good, the bad, everything in between. Here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So let me bring in Jon Stinchcomb here. John, there's a lot of data points in that game against Auburn. They scored a touchdown every quarter. held an Auburn team that had been pretty explosive, although plagued by turnovers. Tigers play turnover-free football, but still only scored 13 points. I don't know that I'm going to go back and rewatch this game as one of those highlight reels that you go back and relive. I don't know if I have a desire to go back and rewatch this game a ton necessarily, but I sort of thought they got better. It seemed like sort of a step in the right direction. It was kind of drama-free on a day there was plenty of drama around college football. Do you think Georgia showed improvement on Saturday?
I do. I think there were some points of regression in my perspective. I think the offensive line didn't have their best day, but I think the fact that the offense overcame that is a positive sign. You look at the overall product coming off the heels of a tough loss against Alabama, one that they did rally in that second half. And I think there were some expectations that they would just come out guns a-blazing, but I think the steady, consistent approach that Georgia took is one that indicates help. You look at their overall schedule, and they're going to play 4 teams that are in the top 10 in regular season play. This was not one of them. This Auburn team on paper looked pretty weak. 2-3 coming into the game is not impressive, but yet you watch them play, and there was a number of self-inflicted wounds that cost them those 3 losses. So for those that kind of watched the games more than just looked at the record, you knew that they were in some spaces capable of being dangerous. And I think Georgia did a really yeoman's job of dismantling both their offense and defense. And, as you just commented, Georgia has not looked elite, but I think we were kind of spoiled. You look at the standard that was set for those national championship runs, and they were historic. And, we haven't seen that from this group, but I still very much believe in this offense and this team overall as being more than capable of putting their own mark on history.
So I want to talk about the offense for a second because I really haven't discussed that on the show yet today. And it was a really weird situation for me in the first half because I believe that Georgia only had, am I right, 4 first-half offensive possessions. And so, they march down the field and they do score in their opening drive, and I had asked them to score a touchdown in every quarter, and they did. They had a touchdown in the first, they had a touchdown in the second. So from that standpoint, they're playing a little bit more consistently than they have in the past. But, John, there's an element of this that sort of feels like playing with fire for me a little bit because, Carson right now is content to kind of check down a pretty good bit. He's completing a lot of passes. He kind of racked up a decent amount of passing yards. His sort of average yards per attempt is not very high. I thought they would try to run the ball more on Saturday. They did. That's fine. It's not, dynamic and explosive, but it's for the most part, I guess, relatively successful. And so you can't really nitpick the numbers necessarily, but the clock rules combined with Georgia's preferred pace, all of a sudden you blink your eyes and it's halftime. And, when you only have a small number of possessions, if you have any miscue whatsoever, then you really miss out on your chance at points. And I don't really know what you do with that because it's obviously not Georgia's style to play a whole lot faster. And, you don't want to play the kind of the breakneck, as, the word desperate got thrown around last week. You don't want to play desperately all the time. But what do you make of the fact that, the game now just has fewer possessions? Georgia has a fairly preferred, deliberate pace. All of a sudden now you got to maximize your moments because you're just not getting the football very much.
Yeah, it's slow. It's slow. The offense, even though productive, the pace is it's an homage to the old ways, if you will, where there's drives of 10 and 12 plays and you don't have the explosives and you don't have the big plays. And quite honestly, the mid-range game, if you will, which was a staple of last year's offense, hasn't been as consistent. And this week it was productive. You look at statistically and the drives, and they end in points, and that's all exactly what you're looking for. But I do think there's a little bit of spoilage on the fans' parts where because of the pace of the game just in general, and then the expectation for big plays, and that's where the entertainment value comes, that hasn't been we haven't been the beneficiaries of that this season. It's been a slower approach, and there have been a number of checkdowns. And it is, at least against Auburn, it did come away with points at the end, but it just hasn't had that wow factor that some of the other teams and other years have shown. So I think there's a number of reasons for that. Obviously, not having guys like Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey factor in. I think that the injuries up front were factors. I think we've also missed on some of the shots that we've taken. But at the end of the day, it just means that it's been slower. I'm grateful for a 31-13 victory, but it's not that same flash that we've grown accustomed to.
We played clips earlier of Kirby Smart having some pretty pointed remarks in the direction of Georgia fans. What did you make of that?
Isn't it funny? I mean, he coaches everyone. He coaches his players. He coaches the coaches. Now he's coaching the fans. We're not free and clear from him offering some correction points. And he's not wrong. I mean, the environment on Saturday was not electric. And part of that's almost to be expected. You're playing against a 2-3 team, somebody who has not lived up to the billing of the rivalry that history might indicate this matchup would be a bigger game. It was not a big game for the fans. It was, golly, there's so many other games that you've circled. With that said, that same standard that's trying to be held for the players and the coaches of being elite, if we're going to be one of those stadiums where opponents fear coming, that was not lived out on Saturday. It was not electric. It was at times flat, and the student section was empty for most of the second half. So he's not wrong in that. I will echo those sentiments. On the other side of the coin is I think there's a different sentiment that's being expressed from Coach Smart this year rather than others. I've heard more about the opponents being good, and Kentucky is a good football team, and we've got to respect if Auburn hasn't had the turnovers that they've had, and this is SEC football, and in the environment, it's all these exterior factors that are being mentioned. I'm not making light of it. I don't think that he's wrong in those assessments, but it's a different tone that's been set this year than other years. In other years, I don't care who we're playing. It's about our locker room and our guys and what's happening in-house. So I think there's a little bit of recognition that there isn't probably that separation. And when there's not that separation, then factors like, hey, I need energy to come from other places. I need other factors to play in, and that being our home environment being difficult for the opponent, that can really affect the outcome of the game and series and drives and plays individually. I think that's why we're hearing some of those comments being made that we probably have been free and clear from in years past.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And, I'm guessing you would probably agree with me that Kirby's earned the right to say this because there's no one who goes out of his way more to make fans a big part of the story when Georgia gets big wins. I mentioned some of the home games a moment ago, Arkansas 21, Tennessee 22, the way in which he just praised Georgia fans ceaselessly after the road game at Notre Dame in 2017. Like, Kirby Smart has made fans a major part of the story for UGA, even though we think of him as like the most buttoned up, super serious football coach in the world. He really does kind of put on his sort of salesman, public facing hat when he, engages with fans. And so if he goes the other way, I think he's earned the right to do that because it's not like he's mentioning fans for the first time just because, he wants to have some sort of scapegoat, something to blame something on. This is a guy who finds a way to talk about the fans in virtually every home game press conference for sure, sometimes road games as well. Every home game press conference, Kirby Smart's talking about the fans unsolicited in those discussions with the media. So just given the fact that this has been such a prevalent theme for him, I think he's got every right to say whatever he wants to say.
Yeah, he has certainly earned it. And I think the same reason we as fans are looking at these teams going, man, the standard has been raised. We have seen what elite looks like. We have seen the red and black dominate games, and that's the expectation. Same flip that coin, the same standard is being held to the fans. We have seen Sanford Stadium rocking to the point of affecting the opponent, where the offenses for whoever's visiting Sanford Stadium, they can't go through their normal process. They have to change their game. We've seen the offsides penalty, the false start penalties, the adjustments that they make. They're being affected by the fan base. And so Coach Smart's going, hey, I've seen this better. And it's that same standard that we're applying to our assessment of this football team is what Coach Smart is using for Sanford Stadium and the fan base. Is I've seen what you're capable of. I've seen what it looks like when our fans are engaged and when Sanford Stadium is rocking and how it affects the game. And we need more of that. And it's fair for him to assess the stadium and the fans in that way, just as I think it's fair for us to say that's the standard that's set across the board. That there's some synergy that gets created when you look out and you see the performance on the field and it matches the energy and standard that's being lived up to in the stands.
So let me just say one more point about this, and let me try to explain why I think this really matters to me, is because this goes beyond just the notion of a spoiled Georgia fan who's gotten too used to winning. I really do believe it's a bigger topic than that. John, this to me is more about the way in which college football starts to look more and more like the NFL, a league that you know very well. Do I have this right? I believe the Chiefs lost 6 times last year, right? They're Super Bowl champions, but during the regular season, they lost 6 times. In other words, that was 6 moments in which Chiefs fans could complain and sort of point fingers and play the blame game about what went wrong. But then the next week, you sort of get right back on the wagon again because, your team's got a chance to go out and win a game, and eventually you become Super Bowl champs. But not a perfect season for even a team like the Chiefs, who may have the greatest quarterback among the greatest quarterbacks of all time, yet they still lost 6 times. I said this in the show last week. Look at the Falcons fans on, was it Thursday night against the Bucks there, where Falcons have already lost twice this year. That's a lot of room for disappointment. But when you find a way to win a game, all that's forgotten, and now you're enjoying this particular moment because in the NFL there are wins and losses for most every team to have, and you have to have a short memory about some of these losses. College football really hasn't been that way. The best teams aren't just the best every week. They're dominant. Georgia was for the most part in 2021 and 2022. It was rare for Georgia to even play a close game. But as I've said before, I don't believe that's the era Georgia is in anymore, and I don't believe that's the era perhaps anybody is in. This is a little bit more of a level playing field across the sport than it used to be. And so this idea of Georgia fans are in a bad mood because they lost, you're not going to make it in the new age of college football if you're still thinking about last Saturday when you get to the new Saturday, because the NFL folks will tell you that's the way that league has been for a long time, and I believe now college football is a lot more like that too.
I couldn't agree more. I think that you look at the NFL model, and there's 32 teams, but the separation from the top third and the bottom third is so minute that, a losing record of 7-10, like, golly, that's terrible. And 10-7 probably gets you in the playoffs, and you have a chance at making a run for a Super Bowl. So 3-win swing is huge, and it's because the separation in talent is so close. You look at the number of games that come down to, that last drive and single score separation between what makes a winner and a loser. That's every Sunday in the NFL. And we haven't seen that in college football. We've seen such a separation in talent. The Georgias and the Alabamas and the Ohio States of the world were dominant. They were leaps and bounds talent-wise in front of everyone else. And I don't know if it's just because of the transfer portal or NIL and how you're able to buy and influence players in that way. I still think there's a huge separation in talent from the elite and everyone else. and Georgia is most certainly in that upper tier. But when Alabama loses to Vanderbilt, I think it piques all of our attention. I think it demands it. When you look at Arkansas beating a top 10 team against Tennessee, one's unranked and one's top 10, and that's 2 of 3 games, if not 4, that were top 10 teams getting knocked off. You're going, there's something going on across college football landscape where there's no longer the untouchables at the top and everyone else. And that's an adjustment that I think we're all witnessing in real time, that there is not that huge gap between that upper tier and everyone else. And there's an adjustment phase. I think it kind of pairs well with the college football playoffs as you're adding more teams. It's not like the days of old where you could pretty easily identify the top 2, if not just the top 2, maybe it's 4. And now you're going, well, there's 12 teams that it depends on the weekend, because Alabama against Georgia, that first half of Jalen Milroe and that the show that they put on, you're going, who can touch this team? And then you watch them against Vanderbilt and you're going, boy, do they look mortal. They look pedestrian at times. So I think that's why this transition it's a departure from what we've known, and it's new landscape for all of us as we get adjusted to what college football plays out on a week-to-week basis.
I want to ask you one more thing about the crazy weekend we just saw, but before that, let me also remind folks about our friends at Laster Tractor. I love having them part of DawgNation Daily because down there in South Georgia, they're taking care of folks. You got big property that needs to be tilled and mowed and all that kind of stuff. Our friends at Laster Tractor want to do that for you because they're South Georgia's hometown John Deere dealer, and they've been that way since 1956. They're going to give you a great deal on all those compact utility tractor packages. I'm talking about the John Deere Series 1 tractor, the Series 2, Series 3, Series 4. Depending on the size of property you have, everything from like 1 to 5 acres all the way up to something much larger than that, John Deere's got you covered on all of that. Our Laster Tractor's got you covered on anything you need for John Deere, including equipping it with all kinds of attachments like the loader bucket, the rotary cutter, and more. And nobody's going to give you a better experience, a better deal than our friends at Lassiter Tractor when it comes to a John Deere tractor for the property you have, whether you're taking care of farmland or you just want your big yard to look good. Our friends at Laster Tractor got you covered on all of that. So I want you to find your local dealer for your next compact utility tractor that has the unmistakable John Deere green color, the great logo that's recognizable all across the world. Our friends at Laster Tractor got you covered on that. So find them online. It's LassiterEQ.com. Laster is LASSETER. LassiterEQ.com for more on that with our friends at Lassiter Tractor. All right, John, for me, and I'll finish with this, and I appreciate your time as always, I was borderline giddy on Saturday. Obviously, I like it when Bama, Tennessee lose. That's kind of fun. But the sheer drama and excitement, the unforeseen nature of such a shocking upset. Vanderbilt beats Alabama. Tennessee's the hottest team in the country. They go lose at Arkansas. Man, college football just really, really delivers every single season. I just love it so much. What did you make of just such a thrilling college football weekend that included results like that on Sunday everybody was talking about?
Yeah, very rarely do I enjoy or engage in games that Georgia's not playing. But this Saturday, and this Saturday is not alone, there have been a number of games that piqued my interest. And, I find myself watching other teams just for enjoyment that I haven't found myself in those spots. So I thought it was a glorious thing. I'm happy for Vanderbilt, who, I've had buddies play there, and it is non-competitive most times. And Coach Saban was right in saying that the atmosphere in Vanderbilt, when you go as an away team and play there, it is different than every other place in the SEC. To see some of those standards shaken, I think it's good for the game. And I certainly enjoyed it. I'm grateful that, last week when Georgia took it on the chin pretty early and they go down 28-0, the response from our players was, there's no quit. They kept their composure. They fought back. He ended up taking the lead, and you're going, wow, that's a testament to the culture that's being created. In contrast, watching Malachi Moore and the fit that he pitched in that game, one, was eye-opening, and two, the response that the coaches have had to it so far. I don't know what's happened behind doors, but the instant response of, he's a passionate guy, and it just means so much to him, and he was much calmer in the locker room. I would be more concerned if that was the storyline coming out from Georgia's locker room following a game like that. It was astonishing to watch in real time, going, this can't be real. And then to hear the initial response to it, I think is a problem. Yeah. So there's a lot of exciting things happening across college football. It makes for a number of games that are more interesting than otherwise would be. But for Georgia alone, you look at the schedule that remains, and there's a lot of really good regular season football games left to be played. And then you look outside of that, and that storyline continues. There's a number of good games that probably would have been unexpected that now are going to be factors in how that postseason plays out.
No, I think you're exactly right, John. I love it. I appreciate your insight on all of this. Always so great to get your opinion about Georgia football. Very entertaining season. Obviously, we'll hope for the best for these Dogs as the weeks progress here. And we'll, of course, look forward to talking to you about it here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. John, thanks so much for your time.
Always enjoy it. Love it when we beat Auburn, even when they stink. And go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I mean, kind of lost in all of this, as John points out, a rivalry win against Auburn. I don't know what to make of the future of rivalry games. I really don't, because, and you sound like the old man on the porch kind of complaining about stuff like that, but, there's just not room to care about everything equally, and there's so much energy that goes to, like, the big games against the Alabamas, the Texases, the teams like that it just seems like the rivalry games are kind of suffering because of it, especially when, Auburn, Florida teams like that are not very good. Obviously makes it very hard to sort of sell that. That is just a very real thing here, that the natural juice that would have once existed in the stadium for a rivalry game like Auburn, that is not a natural built-in thing anymore because of the way in which college ball is kind of altered and changed. I believe that's just sort of an unavoidable fact. Now, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. How much fun is Utopia of the Seas going to be for us coming up in April for our DawgNation cruise? And, there's a couple of different categories that we hear from when it comes to a DawgNation cruise, a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. There are people who sort of know what it's all about, and there are people who are maybe learning about some of this for the very first time. Here's one thing I want you to understand. If you've never cruised before, if you've never experienced that, but you've heard me talk about it, I think it's really worth your time. And probably the best way to do that is just to sort of reach out to Jessica Slater and look at everything that Utopia of the Seas has to offer. Because what's amazing is if you've never been on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, it's almost like you can't even imagine all the things there are to do. The unbelievable experience in all the various neighborhoods. You have the Boardwalk neighborhood, which has the Aqua Theater and the Carousel. You've got the Central Park, which is literally like being in a big city Central Park right in the middle of town, except you're right in the middle of the cruise ship. You've got the Royal Promenade, which is filled with dining and bars and the entertainment on board the ship. There is just so much to do. In fact, over the course of, like, say, a 4-day DawgNation cruise, you'll never get to do it all because there's just so much that can be done, but you'll be busy having fun the entire time, which we obviously love. That's why I want you to check out Jessica Slater today. She's the travel agent specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean. She can help you get your DawgNation cruise booked for April of 2025, but anything else that Royal Caribbean's got going on, including Icon of the Seas, the debut within the next year or so of Star of the Seas, she has got you on all of that. So give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. So let me give you a thought. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the big results from the weekend, obviously. Let me give you a thought that I had both watching Alabama lose to Vanderbilt and Tennessee lose to Arkansas. So two quarterbacks factor mightily in those games. You have Diego Pavia now at Vanderbilt. For those of you who don't know, Pavia was at New Mexico State a year ago. He was the one that led them to the upset win over Auburn. So Pavia comes to Vanderbilt with very little fanfare. And yet, he has played great for the Commodores. On the other side of the state, you've got Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, who comes to the Vols with huge amounts of fanfare. And it's not that he's been bad, although Saturday I don't believe he's very good, but we warned you going into this game, by the way. This is one of those things we've turned out to be right about, is that in the midst of a very good season for Tennessee, it's not like Nico is lighting the world on fire. And Saturday, he obviously seemed very, very shaken by the environment and the atmosphere that he found himself in there in Fayetteville. So let me ask you this question. Right now, today, who is a better quarterback? Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt or Nico Iamaleava for Tennessee? It seems obvious that it should be Nico because he's got the fanfare. We're led to believe that he came to Tennessee for millions of dollars in NIL. But if you look at the overall numbers, not necessarily better. If you look at the results relative to the competition they've been playing, it looks to me like Diego's having a better year than Nico is. Now, this is not just a discussion about these two quarterbacks and these two teams. This is one of those things that I do believe will be fascinating about college football moving forward. And another example of how this sport could at least mirror the NFL in one respect. In the NFL, and I'm not the biggest NFL fan, but I do find this to be fascinating. You can have Patrick Mahomes and have the best quarterback and have a great team because of how great your quarterback is. That's a recipe for success in the NFL. But another seemingly equally valid recipe for success is to have what we think of as like the rookie quarterback, like the guy who's on a cheap deal, who's not very expensive, does not count very much against the salary cap, and you can build a better team around him. That's what, at one point in time the Philadelphia Eagles were before Jalen Hurts got paid. That's what Brock Purdy still is now for the San Francisco 49ers. It's a franchise in which the salary cap dollars are allocated in a lot of different directions because you're not having to spend on the big bonus baby quarterback. Well, in college football, how you choose to spend your dollars is going to really matter. And it would seem like, just a given that if you got the millions, of course you'd want to buy the big-time quarterback like Nico. But given the results right now for Tennessee, is that money well spent? I'm not ready to condemn him. I'm just saying that it's not a guarantee that when you put that, because I don't care how much money you raise, everybody's got a budget. When you put that big of a percentage of your budget towards one player, if he's only okay, then your team's going to suffer. But a guy like Diego Pavia, if you recognize those guys well, and he's not the only one. The guy that Arkansas brought in from Boise State, we've told you a million times, they thought he was good. And on Saturday, he's pretty good until the cheap shot from the Tennessee player knocked him out of the game. Once again, very little fanfare, we would presume, not super expensive from an NIL standpoint, but really successful. And by the way, given the recent track record of transfer quarterbacks, there aren't that many that have done great because a lot of them have been the sort of, Power 4 type player moving from one school to the other. You almost wonder, the success of Diego there at Vanderbilt, what the Boise guy's doing in Arkansas when he's healthy, you got to kind of wonder, is this going to send more teams looking for the unheralded group of five guy that can maybe come in and play with some moxie? And maybe he won't have the celebrity quarterback, multi-million-dollar vibe and the expectations that come with that. Maybe he's just a guy that wants to come in and ball out and play and have a little hunger to him. You got to kind of wonder if other teams in college football might start looking for their own Diego Pavia, especially if a guy like Nico does sort of continue on the trend that he's in now. Year two, by the way, not year one. He's not a freshman anymore. Year two of a alleged multi-million-dollar quarterback who's kind of just sort of okay, even for a Tennessee team that's pretty good. Let's do a couple of other things here really quickly there as well. Jon Stinchcomb brought it up. Alabama defensive back Malachi Moore embarrassed himself on Saturday. If you didn't see this, totally lost his mind as Alabama was losing that game. Really threw it. You can't say it any different than this. He threw a tantrum on the field to the point that he even walked over and kicked the football when it was down and ready for play. He went over and just kicked the football. It was an embarrassment. And what's even worse is, and there's video online that kind of breaks all this down. Womack, the Alabama defensive coordinator, and even Kalen DeBoer himself tried to get Moore out of the game. They were going to sub him out because he was like losing his mind out there on the field and running the risk of like embarrassing Alabama even further. And Moore refused to leave. I mean, he essentially, basically violated the coaching command to come out of the game. He, what's the word I'm looking for? Just basically violated their command to him there on Saturday in horrible fashion. And this is, and I'm not overstating things by saying this is a real test of Kalen DeBoer's leadership, because it's one thing to lose to Alabama. Fans and boosters will be losing their mind about that. But when you look like you don't have control over your roster, and on Saturday it looked like he did not have control of his roster, all of a sudden now for a coach who's out there coaching in a T-shirt, I mean, he looks very Pacific Northwest. This is as Pacific Northwest as it gets, West Coast as it gets. This is a very casual dude, kind of cut from the Pete Carroll cloth, kind of cut from the sort of like laid back, Western style of football coaching. Very friendly with the media. The people in Tuscaloosa, they love him because he's much cozier and friendlier to the media than Nick Saban ever was. But you got to have the hard edge when it comes to how you handle your players, and we're about to find out if he does. And y'all, we said this last Monday. Look, the loss by Georgia to Alabama demonstrates Georgia's got its own issues to deal with. We have not run from that. We haven't hidden from that. But we also said a week ago that hiding in plain sight was the sloppy operation from Alabama that allowed Georgia, without playing what I would call particularly great football. Georgia did not play great during that comeback, but the comeback took place nonetheless. All of that taking place with really some assistance from Alabama. There are a lot of decisions Alabama made that day that made that comeback a little easier. And we said, watch and see if this doesn't come back and haunt Alabama at some point in time this season. 1 week later, that was what was happening there. And now Kalen DeBoer's leadership will be tested. Now listen, Alabama, even after this loss, they're still as in it as anybody is. This does not end their season. Boy, it does create a little bit of a test for Kalen DeBoer that he did not think he was going to have to be passing so early in his tenure. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And let me also say this real quick before we get back to Georgia and some recruiting talk here for a moment. So perhaps you saw the celebration at the end of the game. Vanderbilt fans earned the right to celebration. They marched the goalpost down Broadway. Really fun to see. But then at the end of the game, much like the Tennessee fans back in 2022 who threw their goalposts in the Tennessee River, the Vanderbilt fans threw their goalposts into the Cumberland River, which is the river right there in downtown Nashville. Why do fans keep throwing goalposts into the river? I don't understand that. Like, the river is like the prettiest part of most of these. I mean, goodness knows in Knoxville, it's the only nice thing in Knoxville is the river. And, I like the river there in Nashville too, although it makes the traffic terrible. But I like the river, there as well. Why are people throwing the goalpost in the river? Like that doesn't even make any sense to me. Like what does the goalpost have to do with the river? Like, wouldn't you want to keep it and be like, hey, I'm sure Vanderbilt's got a Hall of Fame somewhere or some sort of, trophy room somewhere, baseball trophies, if nothing else. Wouldn't you want to put the goalpost in the trophy room or like in the football office? Like, why are you throwing it in the river? That's just pollution. And listen, I'm the last one to be like, I'm nobody's idea of an environmentalist, but I still like rivers. I'm not going to throw a goalpost into the river. It doesn't make any sense to me. But nonetheless, there is something about schools from Tennessee, big wins, and throwing goalposts into rivers. Vols and Commodores now both doing that. We will make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. All right, back to the topic at hand when it comes to Georgia Bulldogs here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're also running crazy late here, so let me see if I can try to get the pace going here. We'll do a lot more of this throughout the week, but there was some very interesting UGA recruiting news, and got to touch on all of that here right now. First of all, on Saturday, the day sort of begins with Georgia getting some very good news. I really like Ousmane Kromah. I love the fact that he has put up very productive seasons for all 4 years that he's been in high school. He was a good player as a freshman, been a good player ever since. Georgia probably a little slow to move in on Kromah, if we're being completely honest, but where they started maybe doesn't matter based on where they end up, ultimately getting the commitment here from a player who I think has a chance to be really good in college. I mean, some of this stuff is never going to be a sure thing, but I'm always going to put my chip on a guy who's been productive, who's put up numbers for a good team against good competition. He plays for Lee County, that's down in South Georgia. Lee County plays the best teams in Central Georgia. They played 6A Colquitt County this year. They play very, very tough schedule. He puts up big numbers against everybody. That's sort of all I need to know. Very happy to have Ousmane Kromeyer as part of this 2025 class from Georgia, and I think that Josh Crawford's going to probably get a lot of credit for this. There was an interesting message also coming out from UGA commit this weekend, Stephon Shivers, and what's going to jump out to some people here is, that's actually Laganza Hayward there. Laganza Hayward, if you're watching a video, you see that. Laganza Hayward is a Tennessee commit that actually we can leave that up there. Laganza Hayward is a Tennessee commit that visited Georgia this weekend. So there's all kinds of action around the visitors and what's going on with that. Some names we expected, some names that were a slight surprise. And anytime you get the committed elsewhere prospect showing up there at UGA, you're always happy about that. Laganza Hayward, the Tennessee commit, comes to Georgia here this weekend. Obviously, his high school team, Toombs County, greatly impacted by Hurricane Helene and the aftermath of all that. So prayers out to the folks down there in Toombs. But Laganza Hayward was at Georgia on Saturday. That's pretty interesting. Do we also have the Stephon Shivers? Can we show this here for a moment? Because Shivers is a UGA commit who put out a message this week that was, I think, very interesting here because it reminds you a lot of what Blackshear, the wide receiver, said last week about, quote-unquote, reopening my recruitment process. I think the understanding here is that Shivers still, much like Blackshear last week, still considers himself a UGA commit, but he's reopening the recruitment process, which is maybe sort of a new language around the idea of a decommitment. Not quite so sure if we can say that for sure, but it certainly seems like with both he and Blackshear saying reopening the recruitment, especially in the case of Shivers here, that maybe now he's likely to land elsewhere, and maybe this is just sort of a new phrasing for what is essentially a decommitment. Pretty interesting stuff there coming from Shivers. Also, let's give you a couple of other big names here for a moment. Justice Terry visits Georgia here this weekend. Terry's a guy that's been pretty banged up during his senior season, but this is one of the biggest recruits that's out there for Georgia in this 2025 class. Yeah, it was expected that he would be in Athens on Saturday, but that doesn't diminish the importance of this. Every chance Georgia has to impress Terry is one that it needs to take the full advantage of. You presume that's what Georgia did. Boy, the Dogs with Terry this past weekend, Elijah Griffin taking his official visit this weekend. Georgia's got a real chance to make a big impression on some very important defensive linemen. Having Terry there on Saturday was a really big deal. And to finish things off here, perhaps the most fun update we can give you on UGA recruiting, because it was maybe the most, at least officially, unexpected. That's the fact that the Milton wide receiver, the Florida State commit, C.J. Wiley, he was on campus on Saturday there as well. And, boy, I tell you, I've been saying this, that go back to that commitment announcement, something about that when he chose Florida State, we televised it live that day, something about that just didn't quite feel final. And I've been saying for a while, if you get him on campus, then maybe Georgia's got a chance to still be in this thing with C.J. Wiley. Well, they got him on campus there on Saturday, and yeah, I think if you're a Georgia fan after all of this, you have to say perhaps the door is open here. There'll be a lot on that this week for sure. Obviously, Wednesday before the Hedges presented by Kroger, Kaylee and Jeff, I'm sure will be talking a lot about that. Big deal to get Wiley on campus, a player who I really, really like. Every Georgia fan who follows recruiting does. Exciting to have him on campus there. You love to see all of that. All right, before we are done today, let me give a quick shout out here. I am really happy to welcome in a brand new sponsor to our program. And one of the things that I love about this is it's our friends from Daytona Beach. And the reason why I love Daytona Beach is because I grew up going to Daytona Beach literally every year vacation-wise from the time I was like, the first airplane flight I ever took was to Daytona when I was a baby. Obviously, I don't remember that, but it was true. But my mom's parents went to Daytona every year. My parents took us, my brother and me, to Daytona every year. We were like Daytona Beach people, going to the boardwalk, going to, in the harbor and all that kind of stuff. We were doing all all of that, so many years at Daytona Beach. Some of my happiest memories as a child are there at Daytona Beach. And now we've got our friends from Daytona Beach as a part of us here on DawgNation Daily. And so as you're thinking about some fall travel here coming up, I want you to think about our friends at Daytona, because you're talking about 23 miles of Atlantic shoreline. You've also got, all kinds of cool things going on, great hotels, great, restaurants, of course. Really kind of famous for like the surfing, if you like to do that. There's a lot of that going on. Obviously fishing, kayaking, everything else. And what's cool is there's an international airport. You can fly directly to Daytona Beach. Super convenient to get there. Great deals right now because of the fall season, stuff like that. Enjoy the awesome restaurants. Enjoy the beautiful beaches. Enjoy really some of the best stuff that you can ever find right there with Daytona Beach. Some of my best memories at Daytona. You can make your own memories there as well. So check out DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that. It's DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that today. Also, hope you'll check out tonight on the DawgNation video channels, On the Beat, Cody Chafin's, Mike Griffith reacting to crazy weekend in college football. They'll have all of that for you here coming up. Make sure you check that out today. In honor of a very busy college football weekend, we got a bunch of golden shoes to give out for you here. We'll start with UGA Nation 412, who says that Hugh Freeze looks like a dude who just woke up from a weekend bender. I do think one of the reasons why a lot of people are so suspicious of Freeze, more so than just his behavior, which obviously is pretty sordid and well documented, he does have some very weird facial expressions. Like, that's a guy who just sort of looks like he's up to something. And I don't deny that. I'm someone who, by and large, thinks that Freeze is a pretty good coach. I don't think his facial expressions does him any favor. By the way, he called out his quarterback, Peyton Thorne, again on Saturday. Did y'all see that? Next golden shoe here going as well. Sam Stevens shares this. It's the famous dragon meme. The very rough-looking Bear Bryant, tough-looking Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer, though, right now does not look like he belongs in the same category of the others. Now, obviously, you got the win against Georgia. You can't deny that, but we'll still laugh at him after losing to Vanderbilt there on Saturday. Sam Stevens shares that. Sam, we'll give you a golden shoe for that. How about our next golden shoe as well? Going to our buddy Mad Dog, who gives this to us. He says it was a historic night for Vandy football. Hashtag anchor down. And you see the anchor on top of the elephant right there. Well done with Mad Dog. A beautiful work of art there. That's actually suitable for framing, by the way. I'm sure a lot of Vandy fans would probably love to have that. Mad Dog, you might sell those prints. But we'll give you a golden shoe for that here today. Great stuff there on that. And another golden shoe as well, going out to Marv Author, who makes this beautiful graphic that says, anything's possible. He says, Dogs defeat Auburn, Vanderbilt defeats Alabama, and that means that the Georgia Bulldogs are right back in the thick of everything for this chase for a spot in the playoff, and maybe, who knows, a chance at a national championship after that. Marv's graphic tells the tale right there for sure. We'll give you a golden shoe for that there, too. Lousy, stinking Gators, they beat UCF, but they get a win over the Golden Knights, but they get no golden shoes. And it's been 1,430 days since they've beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. Fun to consider all of that. That is our Gator Hater Updater. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on all of that here today. All right, so we're glad you're here. Longest show we've had in probably a long time. But nonetheless, we'll dive in here, get your comments. We'll find out what's going on with all of you here today. And obviously we'll react to a really wild weekend college football that I loved. I mean, I was so entertained by that. I'm also always happy when I get a chance to go home and watch some games. That's just always kind of a cool thing. I live a little closer to Athens now, so it's a little easier for me to get home, which is great. Get settled in, you watch some games, you love that. Al Chandler says, I don't think any football team in Alabama won on Saturday. Yeah, I saw where UAB got blown out too. The Trent Dilfer era, failure to launch perhaps there in Birmingham. Bobby Payne says the road construction's made the drive impossible for months now. There's a lot of that going on. Bobby, we're glad you're in here today. Matthew Goodman says the fans being loud not only helps the team, but also is huge for recruiting. Yeah, plus it's just, I mean, look, here's the thing for me. It's just fun. Like, when you're in one of these like really incredible atmospheres, it's just fun. It's just fun. By the way, we showed video earlier. I gotta want to like put this guy on blast because I don't think he's doing anything wrong or anything. But on a day in which the subject is like lackluster fan behavior, one of the videos we showed earlier was like a UGA student who's like doing his shaker like this while he's scrolling through his phone. Like, I don't think anything speaks to not exactly like the most raucous environment. And this dude just kind of doing this deal right here, kind of going through the motions while he's, checking out, what do you call it? What's the one where you swipe left and right? What's that called? You can tell I'm married. Whatever. Tinder, thank you very much. Yeah, Cody knows. There you go. Cody makes it very clear. No, Cody does not know, but Cody's aware, but he does not know. Let's say it that way. Yeah, Jay is single. So ladies, check out Jay on Tinder, I reckon. Yeah, Jonathan Moore, he knows too. I don't know why I blanked on that. I was also looking for a word today on the show. I really hate this. It's like I'm just motor mouth talking all the time. Every now and then the word just won't come. The word I was looking for is when you don't obey your authority. What's that word called? I still can't think of it. Insubordination. That's the word I was looking for. Insubordinate. I couldn't think of that word. That Malachi Moore was guilty of insubordination on the field on Saturday. Perhaps if I can't think of the word, it's too big for me to be using. But insubordination, that's the word I was looking for. I could not think of that word to save my life a minute ago. Let's see what else. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. Taylor Russell says insubordinate and churlish. I don't really know what churlish means, but it sounds like what he was. It's like, did you ever learn about onomatopoeia in school? Words that sound like what they mean? I don't really know what churlish means, but the onomatopoeia of that word would lead you to believe that's probably what Malachi Moore was being. Jay Shipes gives you militant as well. Jonathan Aaron says, I don't want to turn the goalpost into the river. I just want to turn it red with food coloring, which obviously goes back to our funny thing before last year's DawgNation invasion. But like I said before, listen, no one's going to like confuse me with like National Audubon or one of those type of things. That's just not my MO in life necessarily. But who doesn't like rivers? Like rivers are beautiful, right? It's like, I don't want a bunch of concrete goalposts, fiberglass, whatever they are now. I don't want a bunch of goalposts like jammed into a river. Like, who wants to do that? But, my understanding is I believe the Vanderbilt, somebody went and actually fished the goalpost back out of the Cumberland River when the Vanderbilt people threw it in there. But the Tennessee people 2 years ago, like, what are people doing throwing the goalpost in the river? I don't understand that. I do not understand that. I like this from Lesko, who says, that Kirby was talking directly to DeBoer when he said, welcome to the SEC. He very well might have been, although he did kind of like, he said it after mentioning the A&M Missouri game, but it certainly felt like it matched the DeBoer part of that. You're probably right. And he says that, Lesko also says that DeBoer is the Ryan Day of the SEC. I'm telling you right now, and I know this has been a little bit of a hot topic in Tuscaloosa, I am absolutely 100% on the side of Bama fans here. I don't want my coach coaching in a T-shirt. I just don't. I don't want Lane Kiffin coaching in a hoodie. I don't want my coach coaching in a T-shirt. I just don't. And look, I realize the world's a more casual place than it used to be. I totally get that. I go to the airport, everybody looks like a slob. I completely understand that. But I don't want my coach coaching in a T-shirt. I just don't. And if you wear a T-shirt to coach in, you better not lose to Vanderbilt. That's all there is to it. Because once you do, they're going to pick apart everything you do. And if you're not dressed the way that a coach dressed, because look, here's the thing. A lot of you kind of know this. In the South, we dress up for football games more than the other parts of the country do. The other parts of the country think that's weird. It's 100 degrees. You got, everybody wearing a collared shirt. Most of the gentlemen are wearing pants. Ladies are wearing their nicest dress. That's just the way we do. Georgia fans show up overdressed and overserved. That's just a tradition. And they don't do that in the other parts of the country. They wear jeans, they wear T-shirts, they wear, they just do that kind of stuff. But listen, if you're a jeans and T-shirt person, I got no beef with you whatsoever. No complaints with you whatsoever. You're not coaching the Alabama football team. But when you coach the Alabama football team, you need to tuck in your shirt. You need to wear a belt. You got to have a collar. There is professional attire associated with coaching a football team. And if you're going to try to redefine what that is, because listen, I'm also a big believer that post-COVID, I think it's an absolute disgrace that the basketball coaches don't wear suits anymore. Now that probably makes me 100 years old, but I do think that everything's so dressed down now. I don't like that. But nonetheless, Caleb Meyer says, I am sick of whining fans. These games aren't as big because our opponents aren't holding up their end of the bargain. He says, but we're so much better than everyone. Do you want us to regress? I think it's a fair point. I think it is. And I'm not going to jump up and down about this. I'm not. But just notice, if you're always 1 foot from happiness, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like if you're always if you're always just a few inches away from happiness, just notice that you're always a few it's like this thing of, man, I could just be happy if I'd get this right, this right, this right. Honestly, just notice. Let me just not say too much more. How about this? Allison Whitaker says, when I was in undergrad at Georgia, I wore a sundress and a huge hat to match every game. The game day dress is iconic. It absolutely is, Allison. Absolutely is. I love that about Georgia football. I love seeing everybody, well-dressed. Nothing like a great sundress and a, cool, oversized hat like that. I love that. That's just classic Southern style. It's one of the things that makes Georgia football so much fun, Allison. That's really cool. Really cool indeed. How about Randy Payne checking in from Tifton? Randy, we hope you're okay down there. I honestly don't know how beat up Tift County got. I know that, Blount's County and some of that area around there really got messed up. But I hope you guys are okay down there in Tifton. We'll see you in April for the DawgNation Cruise, of course. Aaron Dixon says Vandy made millions in free promotion. I think they probably did. How about this? Stephen Venanzi says, I live right across the street from Vanderbilt, and the scene on Saturday night was something to see. Yeah, I mean, listen, Vanderbilt's I should say Nashville's a party every weekend anyway. But to have the Vandy people right the center of it all, and can you imagine if you're one of these Vanderbilt's I keep saying Vandy. Nashville is one of the bachelorette parties capitals of the world. Can you imagine these bachelorette parties that see these crazy Vanderbilt students who've never celebrated anything in their life? All of a sudden they're marching a goalpost through town. What would they have thought about that? If you're Lily Mae from Charlotte who came over for a bachelorette party, never been to a football game before, what are you thinking about all of this? You got one of those those little trucks that drive around the bachelorette party on wheels or something like that. What are they thinking about all this on Saturday? Had to be crazy, Stephen. I'm sure you got some stories to tell from all of that. How about our buddy Randy coming to the game on Saturday? Randy, I can't wait for that. That's awesome. Can't wait to see you. ABC Chiropractic says always dressed up for game day. Had a specific dress, red, of course, with a wide black belt. It was the 80s, after all. Listen, I love that. I love 80s style. I love that. That's awesome. ABC Chiropractic. That's fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, no surprise. We got a lot of, classy ladies in the comment section with their dresses, things like that. You love that. Wonderful. Taylor Russell says, this is pretty funny. Some of the Vanderbilt students were so excited about the win that they're only going to get an A- now in some of their classes, which is very funny. It's pretty good. I wonder if there are more Bama fans who are Vandy students than there are Vanderbilt fans who are Vanderbilt students. But then I realized, Bama fans not getting into Vanderbilt, so that probably settles that. Aaron Dixon says, is Malachi Moore running steps? See, I think this has got to go beyond that. I do. and it sounds like I'm just trying to stir up trouble. And I guess to a certain extent, I'm probably, I'm certainly not afraid to stir up trouble on this because I love to see them squirming. But if my player shows me up publicly, I can't punish him privately. You understand what I'm saying? Like this is one of your most important leaders. And by the way, the Bama people are all over this. This is not one of those deals where Georgia people are, just kind of poking at him. The Bama people are all over this. Who was the one former Bama running back that got all over this? Who was that? Got all over this on the weekend. Really coming after Moore for this. Like the Bama people are beside themselves for Moore behaving that way. They are rightly saying that this wouldn't have happened under Nick Saban. But Nick Saban also told you that one of the reasons why he retired was ... kids these days. And he essentially said, these guys are unmanageable, so therefore I don't want to do this anymore. He basically said that. So that's been kind of a thing that's out there. But the point is, when Moore misbehaves in such a public manner, it can't be a private punishment, and then you come out and say everything's all fine and good. Like, if you really want to win your locker room back over and if you want to earn the trust of your fan base, you got to do something publicly. He's got to miss a game or something, or a half a game or something. You got to really trust yourself to come down on him for that. That was bad. I mean, we don't show the video because we're not a highlight show, but kicks the football. He's pouting. He's sulking. It's really not good. And the Bama people themselves are the ones saying it. G. Gray says Malachi Moore is a kid. Move on, BA. Worry about Georgia. Well, listen, we talk about all kinds of things in here, and I think the thing about being a kid is, if you want to say that, that's what the training of coaching is for. And if you let this go on without being corrected, I'm talking about public misdeed corrected publicly, then you're not training what you call a kid very well. And that sort of speaks to the dereliction of duty, perhaps, of the T-shirt wearing Kalen DeBoer on Saturday. I can tell you're bothered by it. I would be too, G. Grace, obviously, if my team lost to Vandy. But nonetheless. Frank Patterson wondered if he had a pacifier in his mouth. So there you go. Let's see what else is going on here. Let's do this. Boy, it's late. Let's go around each comment section and we'll kind of find out what's going on. So BMAC's coming to Austin. Savannah Bryan's going to be in Austin. You'd love to see that. DT also pointing this out, and I did something on X about this yesterday. So last year, one of our great failures, and we've had many, one of our great failures was the advent of Brocktober, and then Brock Bowers subsequently got hurt like 5 seconds later. On all the this is our 10th season of covering Georgia football here on DawgNation Daily. Brocktober will not be on any of our highlight reels. I can promise you that. We go back and do, like, next year when we celebrate our 10th anniversary, God willing, we're still here. When we go back and, like, celebrate the greatest moments in DawgNation Daily history, we will not be Brocktober will not show up in that. Honestly, Go for 3 and 23 will probably not show up in that either, but nonetheless. We tried to make a big push for Brocktober last year. Brock Bowers then got hurt, was never quite the same again. Yesterday, he scored a touchdown for the Raiders. They tweeted out Brocktober. I was like, do y'all learn nothing? Did y'all not do your homework before you draft this guy? There you go. Randy also says, did I see his weather report on recruiting? I did not, but I'll try to scroll back up through and see if I can see it. Larry Goldberg says we're not too far away from Bama players starting throwing shoes. Yeah, that's a good point, Larry. That's the only thing left for Malachi Moore to do. He should have thrown somebody's shoe. By the way, I'll tell you this. My son and I were talking about this the other day. Do you know what's an epidemic right now? Is at these, like, high school and kind of like, like junior high level. And you see this, it's like 7-on-7 all the time now, too. It's like the towel stealing stuff is getting out of control. So basically, like, what Marco Wilson did with throwing the shoes, now pretty much everybody's doing some version of that, trying to steal towels and things like that from other players. That's like an epidemic at the younger level. Yeah, Kaylee's seen that before. She knows that too. There's a lot of that going on here right now. Low Country Dog says, what are Tennessee citizens throwing things in the river? It's like asking when is the last time Tennessee people went to the dentist. Nobody knows. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. But you got to think that, I mean, Tennessee people are like outdoorsy people, right? I mean, you know, if anybody's going to like take care of their river, you think it'd be Tennessee. I mean, for some of them, that's the only plumbing they have. Richard D says the Commodores are the captains of the Tide. You love that. Well, we saw Richard and his son the other day at our DawgNation invasion in Tuscaloosa. That was fun. Oh, yeah. By the way, DT also mentions, so Vanderbilt played Nick Saban clip from the Pat McAfee show saying that Vanderbilt was the only place in the SEC that wasn't tough to play on the road. I mean, can you imagine? Like, that makes it so much worse that not only does DeBoer lose the one game you can't lose, it's the most embarrassing loss you can suffer, without a doubt. Not only does he lose, but you got from a few weeks ago Saban basically laughing and saying it's the only place in the SEC that's not tough to play on the road. Like, Saban is burying DeBoer, and don't think that's not intentional. Don't think there may not be some of that going on. You think Saban wants DeBoer to come in and make Saban's success look like it was easier? I would suggest probably not. At least, you know, privately, I'm sure, you know, Saban probably loves the idea that he's missed today. Loves the idea that Alabama fans are wishing he was still there. I'm sure he loves all of that. But yeah, so you had Vanderbilt play the Saban clip. You had Arkansas played Rocky Top over their loudspeakers on the field while they were all celebrating. There was a lot of that going on Saturday, man. It was great. So much fun. So much fun. By the way, Yard Dog also pointing out that Vanderbilt lost to Georgia State. So shout out to Dale McGee. He gets a transitive property win over Alabama. That's great. Randy Hall wondering when the golden water bottle is going to come out. Yeah, we got to try to enjoy this while we still can, because I mean, pretty soon we're going to have to pour it out in honor of Billy Napier's firing. You'd imagine. We're going to try to enjoy it while we can, though. Savannah Bryant says some folks on SEC Network, ESPN, already have Texas and Texas A&M both being 8-0 in SEC play when they meet in November. Well, there you go. ESPN, boy, they make it seem like it's so easy to predict sometimes, and yet their own predictions are wrong so frequently. Roger Hall says Vandy can be a trap game. They almost always punch above their weight class. You know, sometimes they do, but it's still like the wildest, you know, about the wildest result I can remember in quite some time. Even though Bama was only about as big a favorite over Vanderbilt as Georgia was over Auburn. So it wasn't like the biggest point spread ever. It probably won't even be the biggest point spread updated. In fact, technically speaking, Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame was a bigger point spread upset than Vandy beating Bama was. But it's still the names. It's Vandy beating Alabama. That's just crazy. Just crazy. Pace 1456 says that Kirby also lost to Vanderbilt, but very different situations. This is Kirby in his first year. This is DeBoer, who was hired because of a track record of success. You know, if you care about like recruiting rankings and things like that, the Alabama team that DeBoer is coaching is technically the most talented team of all time. Now, you know, do with that what you will. But if you care about like composite player ratings for one team, no one's ever had a higher, you know, Bud Elliott calls it a blue chip ratio. No one's ever been higher than Alabama is right now. That's what DeBoer, an experienced coach, was in the playoff a year ago. That's what he inherited as the Alabama coach. And, you know, 5 games into it, he's losing at Vanderbilt. And, you know, people say, well, you know, Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe. Now, that may be the better comparison. Not Georgia losing to Vandy, but Saban, the experienced coach, losing to Louisiana Monroe. That could end up being the better overall comparison. But Kirby was a rookie coach for a team that had, you know, been only okay in 2015 and really kind of, you know, only okay for a little while. if you watch the way that Georgia played for the most part in 2016, they had a lot of performances that sort of looked like a loss to Vandy. They actually didn't they lose 3 games in a row that year? Tennessee, Vandy, and Florida. Like, that was miserable. Miserable. Y'all don't care about stuff like this, but I will tell you, it was the lowest point for DawgNation Daily. We'd had a great run of, from when we started, kind of doing the show every day. Because back then, I was trying to show people we could do this every day. I was trying to earn a job. I was trying to make a living for myself. And we'd had good numbers from day one all the way through the first year into year 2. When Georgia lost 3 games in a row, it was touch and go around here for a little while, for sure. I remember that very, very well. All right, a couple of final comments. We're going to go. Frank Patterson pointing out that on the field there was a little bit of an exchange between Kirby Smart and Cam Coleman. Hey, that's the freshman wide receiver for Auburn. Listen, you never know. You never know, right? You gotta try to use anything you got at your disposal. Jalen Jackson says, don't look now, but Texas A&M has by far the easiest SEC schedule left with no conference losses, and they get Texas at home. Jalen, that's worth paying attention to. Thank you very much. Jonathan Aaron says, I wonder what Lou Holtz thought about the Bama game. Ryan Day probably had something to say about it. Yeah, you better believe that's the case. Very good. Foster Moss, I can't read that one. Let's Go Dog says, well, the way I see it, the second half of the Georgia-Bama game gave Vandy the blueprint on how to beat them on defense. Georgia wins the rematch as long as we can start off strong. I hope you are proven to be right on that. All right. Let me do final comment here at DawgNation.com. Georgia's favored by 34.5 on Saturday. I didn't see that. My gosh. I knew this line was that. I just didn't. I would have thought more like, that's a lot. That's a lot. Roger Hall says that DeBoer needs to realize that this isn't the Pac-12. You're right about that. Roger also pointing out that Mississippi State played relatively close with Texas. That game didn't get a lot of attention, but it was, relatively close. Craig Jones says, be sure to watch the SEC short this morning. He says the Undertaker should have made an appearance. Okay, Craig, I'll check that out. That sounds good. Speaking of blasts from the past, Philip Jordan Wells bringing back the bearded version of BA from back in the COVID days, for sure. For sure, that was a wild time. Wild time indeed. Yeah. So I grew a beard during COVID, for those of you that weren't around at the time, just because didn't have anything else to do. I just wanted to see if I could. We were doing the show from home for a little while. So I grew the beard. I eventually shaved it, I think I probably shaved it by the time we got back into the studio because we were back in the studio by May. And so I think I shaved at that point in time. But I grew it. I'd never grown one before. I wanted to see if it'd come in full. It did come in pretty full. Wasn't as like jet black as Ryan Day's is, but mine was also the real thing. Chase Smith says, can somebody explain how Oregon moved up 3 spots without playing and haven't played anybody? Yeah, the Penn State thing at 4 is probably the most ridiculous thing for me, because Penn State hadn't had a big win in a decade. Oregon, Ohio State Saturday. That's going to be, I think, really interesting. I sort of low-key think that Oregon's been one of the most disappointing teams in the country thus far this year. Very quietly, now they haven't played anybody of note yet, but they're just sort of, I don't know, they're just not really, doesn't seem like they're really impressing very much right now. And so, I will be interested to see, can they hang with Ohio State? Because my first suspicion is that they probably cannot, just based on what they've been doing here thus far, which, we like Dan Lanning around here, but I'm a little bit suspicious of that. Al Chandler asked if my wife liked the beard. So she did not want me to do it. I did do it anyway. And she actually really did like it. That she will tell you that and I'm not sure she wants me to do it again right now, but surprisingly, she said that she actually really did kind of like it. So, but she would have never wanted me to do it. I'm probably glad when I shaved it. But while I had it, she actually really liked it. All right, we got to go. Good stuff, everybody. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust RS Andrews on all of that today, including still really hot, like crazy hot. So that means you got to make sure your air conditioning unit's still ready to go for all of that, keeping you cool and comfortable. So get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs and find RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com. All right, you have a great day. We obviously a very long show today, but tomorrow, more on the Georgia offense, what we see from that. Other crazy results from Saturday we haven't had a chance to discuss yet. A lot to unpack. We'll keep it going tomorrow. We'll see you then. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.